Welcome back to another episode of the Cyber Stories podcast, where we have conversations with tech and cybersecurity professionals from diverse backgrounds, experiences, and points of views on building a successful career. Today's guest is a fellow practitioner, now turned friend and colleague, Dennis Chow. Dennis has been in the industry for about 2 decades now and has worked across various fields, including offensive security, cloud security, and most recently, detection engineering. Dennis is also the author of a new book called Automating Security Detection Engineering, which I had the pleasure of being a technical reviewer for. You can find the video about that in the description or show notes. Today, Dennis will be giving us an overview of his career, telling us about detection engineering, and dropping a ton of both technical and career gems related to cybersecurity. But first, before we get into the episode, I'm partnering with Packt for an amazing giveaway of Dennis's new book, which I just talked about. So if you want to level up your skills in detection engineering or cybersecurity engineering as a whole, here's a chance to win a free print or ebook copy of Automating Security Detection Engineering by Dennis Chow, published by Packt. This book will help you understand the architecture of detection as code implementations, develop custom test functions using Python and Terraform, leverage common tools like GitHub and Python to create detection-focused CI/CD pipelines, integrate cutting-edge technology and operational patterns to further refine your detection engineering program efficacy, apply monitoring techniques to continuously assess your detection use case health, and finally, it would also help you create, structure, and commit detections to a code repository. All these are amazing skills that will make you a successful detection engineer in this day and age. So if you want to enter the giveaway, go to my LinkedIn or Twitter account, like the post about this video, and I'll make it easy for you by linking it in the description or in the podcast show notes. And also tag a friend in the comments who would love to learn how to automate security detection engineering. And also in that comment, share why you need this book. And also, whether it's a share on LinkedIn or a repost or retweet on X or Twitter. It's literally that simple. We'll be selecting 5 lucky winners, 3 to receive an ebook and 2 to receive a print copy. The winners will be announced on the 21st of September 2024. Don't miss out on this opportunity to enhance your cybersecurity and detection engineering skills. All the best, and now let's get into the episode. Hey Dennis, how's it going?
Goes great. What about you?
I am doing all right. Glad to be having this conversation with you. I think we first kind of connected when you started working on your book, and like ever since then, we've kind of been in contact. After the release of the book recently, I figured it would be good for us to have a conversation about automating security detection engineering, but also just like you as an individual, as a practitioner, your background and all of that. So that being said, we can get started with with who you are and what exactly you do.
Yeah, sure. So, Dennis Chow, I'm currently a manager for a Big Four. I was previously a director of detection engineering for a SaaS company. I came from Amazon Web Services, doing consulting work, and I started my humble beginnings in IT and the SOC. Right now, I lead a team of about 6 people, and I focus on primarily training and other detection engineering automation aspects. So, how long has it been? I guess I'm getting old. About 14 years in the field of security, and then probably 24 years in IT.
Wow, yeah, that's quite the journey there. So how did you get started in IT or in security? What was that, beginning like for you?
So everyone gets their first break. So I started in IT, got my certifications in high school. Immediately, I went to the Air Force to go try to learn it as well. And then you just keep going. So I took my low-level jobs, put my time in like help desk, and learned all the different aspects I could: systems engineering, networking, and eventually just keep moving on up. Got into SOC, kept trying, had to learn Linux and PCAPing, and just YouTube was out at the time, so resources like yourselves were out there doing their different things, and I kind of incorporated that as I applied for different roles. And someone eventually gave me a third shift SOC analyst role at Alert Logic, and I guess the rest is history. You just keep on moving on up and keep trying to think with different things and get your certifications, and just take every opportunity that your employers give to you whenever possible.
Yeah, yeah, and we're gonna go into more details about like career and your journey and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to also ask you about was your SANS GSE journey. The GSE is one of the most, if not the most coveted like certifications in cybersecurity. It's like a very high level certification, and it takes like a lot of things, effort, skills, all of that to get to that level. And there are only just like a couple hundred of GSE people in the world. So what was that journey like going to, from, whatever your starting point was to getting that SANS GSE?
Oh man, yeah, that's a great question. I got my first SANS cert probably in the first year I was in the SOC. That was a requirement for the IA, and then you just kept kind of gathering more and more. And as you get more, you start realizing you have to maintain these certs. And unlike the CISSP or some other certs, you can't just use all CPEs from wherever you want. It stands with a little bit more limitations on that. I was invited to the GSE uh, beta pilot at the time that they were making the transitions for it. And previously, you could only take it at like Black Hat twice a year. If you were international, like you had to fly in. So I was the first to take it remote, or at least the second wave group to take it remote.
Hmm.
And then they were also trying out something different. So previously it was GSEC and like a few other like requirements in there, and then you could qualify to take the written. And the written was always a written multiple choice, like a traditional SANS cert. The new path, which all of you will be seeing with the X series, the experience series, it's all hands-on. It's all CTF style, and it's a lot of work. So you'll have like a ton of books with you. My suggestion for everyone that's going for this is, one, figure out if you really want to take it. Like to the GSE, yes, you'll be among like these Chris Sanders and all these other Don Murdoch and all these great people out there.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of prep. I
Yeah.
had to study every night for probably about 3 months straight for about 4 hours. I didn't go to bed till like 1. It's practicing everything from the book, looking up things online, trying to get hints. There was a study group out there in Slack, and no one's going to give you hints for it really, because you have to be really quiet about what you say about the GSE. All I
Mm,
can tell you guys for the most part is that obviously they show you a little bit of syllabus of your scope, and you just kind of go for it and think about how can I make it 2 times harder than what you see in the book, and
mm,
then try to make a derivative off that. So my suggestion for anyone going for it is, if you want to re-up all your certs at the same time, that's one aspect of it. But number two, you also want to think about how fast you can be applying yourself. So
mm,
everyone can see the GIAC new hands-on perspectives of their certification. So once you see the live exam VMs, you have like a ton of choices. You really can't guess, and there's like no guessing. I think in the future they're going to make it where you just have to type in the flag answer, so you can't even guess. Yeah, that's coming up soon, I think. And so with the GIAC, you have about like 3 to 4 hours or so for
mhm,
normally, and the pass rate's different. Some are 67%, some are like closer to 80%. And in the GSE, it's a lower pass cut score. I think it's still 67, 70%. But you really don't have that luxury of time. So you have a very long exam. You have about, in my opinion, if you want to get through every single answer and question because it's so hands-on, you have roughly about 2 minutes max, 2 to 5 minutes max for every question in a full CTF net. They give you a machine, here's your random scenario, and they say go figure it out. You have only open source tools that they've listed, and those tools change. Any tools that are considered like cheater tools or things that help you out with a GUI, don't rely on that. And so you have to really kind of know your command line one-liners, maybe Python scripting. Hint, hint, maybe Scapy would be helpful to some of you people. And you have to know every single parameter syntax from there, like from the man page. And I think that is probably the most practical advice I could give someone else. And just keep practicing on Jupyter Notebook. It was pretty gnarly, totally worth it. Hardest exam I've ever taken in my professional career life.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's definitely, like, quite the journey there, and I don't know if I'm ever going to take the GSC, but, I mean, maybe I might set my sights on it down the line. But, yeah, that is definitely quite the journey there. I think also another thing, and I wanted to, like, bring up about, like, your journey and your career is, like, when one looks at your experience, like, there's, like, a combination of both offensive and defensive sort of experience and roles. Most of my career so far has been majorly focused on the defensive side of things. And I'm curious, like, as to how, like, you've managed to both learn, offensive sort of like methodologies and skills, and also like leverage that, for like career transitions between
Yeah.
offensive and defensive roles, and also how all of that has come to like tie in together to make you the security professional that you are right now.
Oh man, yeah. So, and to those of you out there that think you're going to get an OSCP or a CPAN and call it a day, you're probably not going to get that opportunity, or some of you will. So I always have to say there's a luck factor involved.
Mm,
So just keep trying, you'll eventually get there. But my response to all those people looking for offensive roles first, do defensive first, right? There's
mm,
money and stability there, great experience, but you can't break into something just like you can't defend something you don't understand. So it makes you a better pen tester, or at least a better tester overall when you get in. I got in primarily because I started getting certifications. I would convince employers. They're like, well, you don't do pen testing. I'm like, well, you need to know the red team side to actually do detections or
yeah.
automate some things like that. So I used those certifications. And then like I started creating like random tools on GitHub and just posting it up and Medium. And I would just write these things out and say, well, that sounds kind of funny. How would I bypass that? And
Mm,
then I just write it up some weekends, and slowly but surely, like you kind of get to know other people in the field. So So obviously three things: luck, who you know, what you know, right? And of
Yeah.
course, maybe the underlying factor is your personality a fit for their culture.
Yeah.
And so I got in with KPMG. Well, let me step back. I got in doing TVM work originally for the healthcare side and a few other places I've been to,
What's TVM?
and then threat and vulnerability management.
Okay.
So when you think about like the scans and interpreting results, validating them, like that's halfway to your pen testing type skills. And then I kind of pivoted from there when I got an invite from KPMG to do their corporate side as well as their customer facing side. And then from there, you just kind of develop your tool bag, your skill sets, and you try to have your stuff ready to go when you're interviewing elsewhere. I've kind of went back to the blue team side, I guess more of a blue purple ish side, and I decided that I didn't want to become a good tester. You also become eventually a red teamer and then a researcher full on. And
Yeah.
I kind of needed to move up in the career. Like I don't want to say I chickened out, but I did say like among the greats when you're looking at like Lena Lau, you're looking at Malware Unicorn, you're looking at Chompy and Kevin Beaumont and stuff like that. And like these people spend all day doing that. That's what they care about. That's what they love, and that's what also makes them great researchers and testers.
Hmm.
I kind of didn't want that. I kind of wanted a little mix of both. So I went back and did found detection engineering when it finally became its own, I guess, field.
Yeah.
And I kind of didn't look back. So you can take the best of both worlds. And obviously, a lot of testing is 90% prep about your exploits, enumeration, and reporting versus the actual exploitation and popping shell. A hint for all of you out there: that's rare. Popping shell is not it's not an everyday thing in your engagements. And then I just started writing rules based on that, what I learned on the blue team side, and just again did the same thing, kept posting it, and then getting certs and just compounding it. It's been a long treadmill of certs and, as you know, like content activity into the wider public.
Yeah. 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 I think that's like one of the best ways to kind of like, build the career that you want for yourself. Like a lot of people end up being stuck in a specific kind of role because they don't have the skills or they don't know the right approach to getting the skills, trainings, and also like recognition that would allow them to transition to another role or another aspect of
Mm,
security that they might be interested in. So for me, I've had a little bit of a taste of that. It's not necessarily like offensive to defensive. For me, it's more
yep.
so been like from, like analyst to detection engineer, from detection engineer now to like security and automation engineer, right? So I don't know what the
Yep.
next thing might be. It might be software developer or something like that. But I think I kind of have like a understanding of like what do I need to do in regards to like move in between roles. What skills do I need to build? Like how am I able to like sell myself during the interview based on what I know, what I've done in the past, but also what I'm learning and what I'm doing right now that can
Yeah.
be a value add to an organization. And people need to realize too that a lot of people that when you get a job, a lot of times, especially you're like senior level, or like staff or principal level, like you don't just hit day one like running. Like you have a bit of a ramp up period where you have to learn the organization, their processes, where to do things, like all of that stuff, right? And that's an opportunity for you to kind of like get used to how things are done there. So you're not expected to like hit the ground running on the first day. Of course, it would be great if you do that, but like especially if you're like engineer one, engineer two, like mid level, maybe sometimes even some senior level, like you do have a bit of a ramp up period. So I think like that's like one of the like what you just described is like the perfect like synergy between like skills, like training, certifications, blogging, writing tools, and also like putting yourself out there to allow yourself the opportunities that will help you transition into whatever kind of adjacent or horizontal or parallel role they're looking for within security.
Yeah, I think you're right. And to echo that, I'm not an avid book reader. I was always been into the technical books because it equated to making money. I don't read for fun for some reason. I need to start doing that.
Yeah, yeah,
But like I'm an introvert, so there was a lot of you out there that's an introvert. I had to force myself. There was a lot of practice,
yeah,
and you don't have to go to Toastmasters. You can just do stuff like this too. But start and just go meet up someone in person. Like
yeah.
go to these sites for some places, your local events, and there's free and cheap events all over the place. I guess the other opportunities that can help you present yourself and communicate further. There's this book that I wanted to discuss with uh, the Ideal Team Player.
Mm,
It's more like a managerial book, but it gets you into the practical mentality of how to operate in a corporate environment
right.
and how to select great allies. And it's more than just for management. You can actually be, if you're in that junior level role and you want to so that you want to get to the senior or senior to lead, you're going to have some aspects of communication,
Yeah.
leadership aspects. And I think that to dovetail to your items is maybe you just need a boost. Maybe you just need some ideas
Hmm.
and watch out for work weasels. There's always going to be people stealing your ideas. You don't have to have your guard up, but you do need to be able to defend yourself and assert yourself and put yourself there. So take every opportunity, like I said, and put your name on it and see
Yeah.
where it goes.
Yeah, yeah, that's one of the biggest things. Like, there are things that I've done or I've tried in regards to like putting myself out there, that have put me a lot out of my comfort zone, but it's really helped me, like, both in and out of my career, like both in my job or the jobs I've had, and also like on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, right? Like, being able to like post projects I'm working on, being able to like make technical videos. Like, initially when I was making technical videos, I was like, yo, I'm way out of my league here. Like, I'm literally just like a cybersecurity intern. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing, and I'm making this cybersecurity lab. But like, that lab went on to become like one of the biggest projects I ever worked on, at least at that point in my career, right? And like,
Yeah,
even practitioners in the fields, like, were endorsing it or like recommending it. And that was coming from me as an intern. So like, at that point in time, like, I would have never thought like, oh, like someone would ever like think that what I did was good. Like, sometimes you just need to put your ideas out there, right? And actually get feedback. One of the things that actually made me start putting my content out there was because I also kind of knew that the security community is like super, we can be nice, but we could also be super brutal and like critical about like things. So I figured, well, the worst thing that can happen is I get like really critical and brutal comments and feedback about my work, and it will help me get better, right? Like, that's the
yeah,
worst thing that can literally happen. So like, I definitely encourage people, like, if you're working on something really cool, or even maybe like a different iteration of something that already exists, don't be afraid to
yeah,
put it out there. Whether
oh,
it's
yeah,
video, whether it's blog, like, you don't have to like give yourself like a content creator title. Like, it's not necessary. Like, you don't have to like have the fancy cameras. You don't need that. Like, you just need to like put something that actually makes sense, like, about what you're working on, and you can share that with the community. And you never know who might find that. You never know what that might be useful for. I've had situations where like in interviews, like, I'm literally like going through like my blog or like my GitHub of like what I worked on, and they're like, oh, like going through like all the different steps, the stages, all of that stuff, and that's literally like helped me with like opportunities, jobs, offers, and all of that stuff. So I think that's one of the biggest things like you can do like for your career, especially in the community that we have, in cybersecurity.
yeah. Excellent point.
Yeah. Here at Cyberwox, our mission is simple: to provide top-notch cybersecurity education and career guidance to help you succeed. We've been consistently delivering on this promise for over 4 years. With our expanded resources, we're better equipped than ever to support you. If you're looking for more career advice on cybersecurity engineering, personal growth, productivity, and even job opportunities, then check out our Cyberwox Unplugged newsletter. You can subscribe at cyberwoxunplugged.com or use the link in the description. You can also join our thriving community of about 5,000 cybersecurity enthusiasts on the Cyberwox Academy. Here, you can find mentorship, coaching, career help, and a supported network to boost your growth at every stage of your cybersecurity career. Whether you're into offensive security, defensive security, cloud security, DevOps, DevSecOps, or even have interests like anime, watches, personal finance, or cars, there's a channel where fellow cybersecurity enthusiasts are eager to connect with you. If you need help landing your first job, we've got you covered with our resume template for entry-level professionals and our comprehensive career plan and Notion template to chart your path to success. And if you're a fan of our Cyber Stories podcast, it's now available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So don't forget to subscribe or follow and leave a rating to support our mission of making cybersecurity accessible to everyone. And finally, I am super excited about our upcoming winter merch drop for the Cyberwox Essentials collection, which will be live soon. It's going to be amazing. So in order to make sure that you don't miss out on that, head over to store.cyberwox.com and sign up for our mailing list so that you'll be notified as soon as we release this collection. Look, we deeply appreciate your support and are committed to continually expanding our resources to make cybersecurity education, community, and career guidance more accessible. Now, let's dive back into the video. Moving on from your career between offensive and defensive, now you're doing detection engineering, right? And you've been
Mhm.
doing that for quite a while. Like, amongst all the things that you've done in your career, right? Between offense, defense, cloud, consulting, why did you end up in detection engineering? Why is it that that's what you're doing right now of all the things you could be doing?
Um, right opportunity and time, I think.
Mm,
So you look at 5 years ago, there was no detection engineering. Like you had detection engineering responsibilities, but you were either
yeah.
a full researcher or perhaps you were in infrastructure engineering with a focus on security. I think today, because everyone's growing into this whole fusion center model, and honestly, if you look at 20 years ago, the fusion center model already existed from DoD and JSOC
Mm-hmm.
kind of aspect. But we're moving back to this thing now, and I think I look at geopolitics for the most part. So I look at
Mm,
which administration's coming in, likely to spend money. So for those of you out there, if you're looking for where's that data at, there's some cool stuff at opensecrets.org where it has some interactive graphs for you. And I try to shape my career path around where the money's going. And
Mm.
maybe this is the greedy part of me, but admittedly, you don't do cybersecurity just for, well, you do it for fun initially, but then you want to get paid for it.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for max pay in a lot of ways, and I kind of follow that trend, and then I start shaping my intentions around it. And you look at the Verizon data breach reports and threat intelligence coming out, and if you look at financial, healthcare, and all these places, the common theme is ransomware. They couldn't detect it, or they detected it way too late.
Mm-hmm.
Detection engineering came out and said, "Yeah, I need to go there." And that's taking the best of both the worlds. You can still be part-time researcher and then
Yeah.
use some cool things. So I think it's part of my perhaps attention deficit to some degree, but like I find it pretty cool. Like you can actually make the defense, then you get to test it by doing something offensive about it,
Yeah.
and keep tweaking and tuning it. And then furthermore, you want to automate whenever possible. So
Yeah.
that's kind of why I'm here.
Yeah, yeah. No, I definitely think like detection engineering is very like hybrid research, sort of like has like hybrid research components to it. Like my previous role, I did a dog on the cloud threat detection engineering team. It was a sister team to the security research team, and we were working hand in hand with like research and like detection engineering. So some of my work was research, some of my work was like detection stuff. Some of my work was like infrastructure behind the detections, like login pipelines and all of that stuff. So I think it's a like you said, it's a very nice like sort of hybrid between like actually doing like detections work, like actually identifying malicious activity, but also like doing some research. Like sometimes you have to do some really low level research into like
Mhm.
systems to understand how they work and then understand how to detect the threats against them. I think that's just, it's like a really cool like sort of role where you have your hands in like multiple things, right? Like you said, you also have to use sort of offensive or attack methodologies to test the detections to see if they work, edge cases, all of those things. So I can definitely see why, you ended up in there. And based off your career so far and what you're doing right now, if I was a beginner, right, let's say you've
Mhm.
never met Dave before, Dave has never done detection engineering before, and Dave wants to become a detection engineer. That's their end goal for their career, right? Maybe I might be in college right now, I might be just starting out, or maybe I might be in help desk. What would
Yeah.
you recommend that I do in order to become a detection engineer? Like, what is the best path to go? Like, like certification. Should I go to college? Should I get a cybersecurity degree? Like,
Yeah.
what should I do if I want to become a detection engineer starting from scratch?
Oh, that's a much deeper question than perhaps what meets the eye. All right, first
Yeah.
of all, let me preface this that I value all education aspects and all
Mm,
mediums. Second, I'm a hiring manager. I've been on the other side, been a contractor and individual contributor, been a student, so I also went through this. I think the most important thing based on that preface above is that good hiring management teams, so be sure to look out for these types. They don't have a huge preference for formal degrees. Like it's good to
mm,
have, and if you had the same exact skills, personality, and fit, a
yeah.
degree might get you in the door before the next person, at least for the interview. Certifications help you obtain skills. Now, remember, certifications, I think people use them wrong in a lot of ways. So, and some of you are thinking, why? Hold on that, because certifications are supposed to be an attestation of what you are and what your experience level is to a certain
Hmm.
degree within the
Yeah.
syllabi of their course curriculum. And so while that might help you get to the door, it may not get you through the door. So getting to the door versus through
Yeah.
after you do your screenings, and you're sitting there wondering why they don't hire you based on aptitude, because they don't want to take the chance on you. They only have 30 minutes to an hour, maybe 2 hours if you look at it, to really try to assess, are you worth spending a lot of money on
Yeah.
onboarding you, and then for you to either leave or not work out. And that's the risk on the other side of the fence that we have to figure out as hiring managers. So I would say, if you have an education up, don't worry too much about a degree, but it doesn't hurt you.
Yeah.
But if you're looking for the fastest path forward, just know there is no direct path in most cases. And I'm not going to say
Mm,
never, most
hmm.
cases to detection engineering.
Yeah.
What people don't realize is cybersecurity, we have our specialization roles. And if you're a general practitioner, you typically start off in the SOC.
Yeah.
And even then, I'm of the belief, and I'm really trying not to gatekeep, but I really do think based on what I've seen over the years and who's come and go and who's been successful and who's not, I think you need to have IT experience. You don't have to have it
Mm,
formally at a workplace. I just need you to show me how networks work. I need to
yeah.
understand that you understand what an API is and what it means in memory and back.
Hmm.
if you start with the foundations, those foundations rarely change. And so if you can tell me more about that and then show me some projects you've been working on and then couple that with security,
Yeah.
I would more likely give you a chance as a SOC analyst when if you were a prior, let's say Windows or Linux admin and you built your first firewall and open source stuff and then you figured out how to make your own like small scale logging lab. I would
Mm-hmm.
much rather have that and you not have a certification or a bachelor's degree or whatever versus someone who comes in with an OSCP by itself and go, yeah, I only did this and I broke all these hack the box things. I'm like, that's great. Like, how would you defend against that?
Mm.
Assuming
Yeah.
they, to the SOC analyst thing. It doesn't mean that you don't have the skills or have to do, but it shows me and it shows me how you operate in your style.
Yeah.
So that's one aspect of it. And then once you're done getting a SOC, you need to spend a few years, in my opinion, kind of figuring out where do you want to be in specialty. Some people think detection engineering is for them, but really, you have to kind of sit and figure it out. Try different employers. You don't have to stay there forever.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, try to get vested whenever you can, but like, figure out industries, figure out what it means to you. So some people are like, I am all about detection engineering. I live and breathe it. You can't tell me otherwise. Cool, right? That makes sense
Yeah.
for you. Learn your foundations, and then you're gonna be doing a lot of reading and a lot of regular expressions and threat intelligence reports, and then converting that
Yeah.
into something tangible like code or
Yeah.
or signatures.
Yeah.
For those of you that are trying to figure out that pivot point from a SOC analyst or a regular system security analyst, let's say ask yourself this: if you're on your own having conversations, if you're on your own thinking about something and you're looking at it from a security perspective, what's the
Mm.
first thing that comes to mind? Is it attacking it? Is it talking to the people about public it? Is it about all the relationships that go around it? And that helps you determine where you want to go and possibly your next pivot point.
Yeah.
Once you determine that, and if detection engineering is still for you, there's the hands-on practical detection engineering guide by Packt by Megan Rohde, and that is a really solid foundation on scene-focused detections. Now, there's so much more than that.
Yeah.
IPS, there's WAF rules, whatever, and then focus on executing something, understanding the forensic artifacts, and then translating that into detection.
Mm-hmm.
And if you keep repeating your stuff, you're going to find better and better methods.
Yeah.
And then I would say, I guess the last thing is every detection engineer that I've seen that's successful, yourself included, I would tell a former self, post blogs sooner, create videos sooner. And if you're trying to work on a certain part of yourself of a soft skill,
Yeah.
like for myself, I'm working on it right now with word choices and speaking slower and learning how to make it comfortable for another audience.
Yeah.
I'm focused on the video. People may have trouble creating great reports. Start with that
Yeah.
first. And then lastly, like always have something in your back pocket in terms of portfolio. Always be thinking about your portfolio. Doesn't matter if you're a detection engineer or not. Today's time is very difficult. There's a bunch of people coming into the field, and even though there's a bunch of demand, there's a bunch more people coming into the field without that same knowledge. And what's your distinction?
Yeah.
Build a portfolio, like just like you've mentioned, your lab stuff. Just try it because the people who are actually making the decisions, we've been there, done that. We're
Yeah.
not going to hold it against you. Now, if you're wrong, we might say something about it and then give you like a hint to where it might be right.
Mm-hmm.
But that's about it. And if someone's like not like that, and you're trying to interview for them, do you really want to work?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's something to think about too. So that that's my thing in a nutshell on how to pivot from to this field at least.
Yeah, I think that was a very, very holistic approach. Both from the education, training, lab and practical side of things, like labs, like putting yourself out there, but also from the hiring side of things, right? And I think like, people that I've worked with that have been great detection engineers, like they have some sort of like SOC background, or some sort of like engineering background, like some software engineering backgrounds. Like it's been a mix, right? Not all
Yeah,
people that I've met that do detection engineering, they never started off with detection engineering, including
yeah,
myself, right? They typically had like software engineering. I've worked with people who had a software engineering background, people who had a SOC background, people who have had a security research background, threat intelligence background, right? So I've
yep,
seen various backgrounds, and I think each of those individuals have like or had unique experiences that they could bring to the role and to the team, and help them like be better detection engineers. So I personally think that detection engineering is not like a entry level sort of role, in my personal opinion.
agree.
Like
Yeah,
me being being a SOC analyst, I think it really helped me before I got into detection engineering. Like I was able to like learn like, okay, like what is this whole security thing? How do these attacks work? Like how does monitoring work? How does login work? Right, at a very bare minimum level. And then getting into detection engineering made me actually dig deeper into those things. But if I didn't have that foundation of working in the software, like about over a year at that point in time, I would barely, I would sink in what I was doing, right? And this was also a role where I was no longer doing like Active Directory; it was cloud, like which was an entirely new field for me at that point in time. But just having that background in like security, analysis, threat hunting, security operations, right, incident response, like all those things really helped me like, be able to like settle into my detection engineering role and grow as a detection engineer. So having some sort of background, I think, is going to be very, very, very helpful. Because like jumping into it head first as your first role, I don't even think I think you might just probably get like cut off from the interview point if you're not a really
Yeah.
strong candidate, or if it's not like an internship position, which I've never actually seen a detection engineer in internship position. So I think those are like really, really good points you made there. And you also mentioned, a book, like books that people, an individual can use. And you mentioned that practical detection engineering book. And I wanted to use that as a segue to your book, your automating security
Mm.
detection engineering book. The practical detection engineering book is like, I think is a really good one for like getting started, like, understanding like the landscape, like, the basics, like trigger something, see an artifact, learn how to detect it. Like that's kind of like what I think that book is for. And, conceptual stuff, all of that stuff. I think your book, Automating Security Detection Engineering, like takes that a step further, like beyond just like the basics, right? It's like, okay, how do you advance this? How do you operationalize this? How do you automate this? How do you monitor what you're doing, right? How do you, what are the metrics you're going to be using for tracking like efficiency and all of that? And I'm able to say this because if you're not familiar with this by now, I was actually a part of the technical review process for this book. So based on my experience with the book, I thought it was really amazing. Like going through like all the different chapters and everything. And like I was like, this is actually great. Like I wish I had this like while I was working as a detection engineer, or like before I was transitioning into my detection engineering role, because it would have really helped me like conceptualize a lot of things that I hadn't had previous knowledge of. But I think it's a really great resource for anyone who's like looking to like get started, or not get started, but dig deeper into like an already existing detection engineering experience. So, with all of that prefaced, I want to ask you, as the author of the book, why did you write the book? What was the need for the book? What made you write this book? Hey there. Did you know that 70% of our YouTube viewers aren't subscribed? If you're part of the group, please consider hitting that subscribe button. We're aiming to reach 50,000 subscribers by the year's end, and your support would mean a whole lot. Thank you so much for your help with this, and now let's get back to the video.
Thank you for the kind words. I felt like there was a lot of talk around there. Everyone has, I felt like there was pomp and circumstance around a lot of things. And so while there was the Detection Engineering Weekly with Zach Allen, and you've worked with them at Datadog, and a
Mhm.
few others that have created this stuff, I feel like they don't give out how to create the pipeline. And I think where a lot of security engineers, especially traditional ones and analysts, have issue with is they're a little uncomfortable around the container thing and the GitHub thing and using these commands. Like they're like, well, that's developer stuff. I'm like, oh, not really.
Mhm.
And then if you see all these pen testers pop in a Jenkins box or a pipeline and they're having a field day, yeah, you need to understand where that's coming from.
Yeah.
And so now more than ever, like I feel like you can have free or cheap resources. So there's nothing wrong to experiment with this. And I wrote it probably like a couple Christmases back, and I just kind of started off as a draft, and I wanted the industry to move forward. I'm really tired of everyone doing okay, guess and check one thing, and then as we saw, and I don't throw shade at CrowdStrike. Like that was a whole process, holistic thing, and there's lessons learned from that, right? So they had a whole detection and engineering pipeline. They had tests, and there was an edge case, right? There was an edge case that stopped it from actually working or checking to make sure that there wasn't that was not going to cause a crash. And so that exact scenario is the reason why I actually created this. Because imagine if you worked at a major Fortune 50 and you deployed something and it worked fine in staging, sort of like, but we all know staging in non-prod is not really representative of product unless you have a true blue green type of native cloud stuff usually, and so that's not always the case. And so I want everyone to understand at least how to build a pipeline, scale up. If you're and sometimes you're a detection engineer and you're like rocking it solo. You're the only security engineering analyst on the one. You don't have time for any of this. You got to keep pumping it out. This is a great way for you to kind of scale yourself up, stay within your current firm without driving yourself mad. And that's primarily the reason why I did this. And I pitched something to Packet. Never thought they'd get back to me. I thought it was just like, yeah, everyone always talked about it. We'll see. And then they came back,
Mm.
and the rest is just history at this point.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm glad to hear that. And I appreciate the opportunity to be part of the review process of the book. And I think like definitely like that point that you made with regards to like those edge cases, like with regards to like like finding, like, yeah, detection, threat detection is like finding evil, identifying evil. But I think when you do threat detection engineering, you take that to the next phase of actually making that process scalable. And I think like what we've seen in the industry is like initially we were doing just threat detection, right? And like, indicators of compromise, right? Very atomic indicators. Everything is just all EDR, WAF based, whatever the case is. But the shift to detection engineering actually makes it a lot more efficient, a lot more engineering based, right? Implementing like continuous integration, continuous deployment, like using pipelines, using containers, using the cloud. Like all of these engineering processes are part of the detection engineering. And it's like a mix of like doing your cybersecurity, like, regular like operational threat detection work, but also some engineering. And I think like the point you made with regards to cybersecurity professionals being comfortable with like code and engineering stuff, like, being comfortable with like GitHub, being comfortable with like, Git, being comfortable with, CI/CD pipelines, with Docker, with DevOps processes. Not saying you have to be a software engineer or a DevOps engineer, but just understanding like how these things work, understanding how code works, like a little bit of automation, like it really helps with making the work you do a lot better, right? Makes it a lot more scalable, and just makes, brings a different, taste to your security program, whether it's like detection engineering or incident response. And speaking on that, I
Mhm.
was going to ask you about detection as code and the detection pipeline. Like this is definitely something that we've seen a lot more, right? It's like, you've seen talks about it, definitely seen like blogs about it, videos about it. It's definitely been something that's been like occurring more and more and more recently. Like, even now with like some, SIMs that are like native detection as code, like Panther, and a bunch of other, platforms out there. Everyone's talking about detections as code, right? I've, had my first share of experience with detection as code. But what do you think is like the right approach to doing detection as code, and especially in regards to the detection pipeline as well as automating security detection engineering? Like, what if, let's say I was a detection engineer or like a SOC analyst, right? Like it's like a senior SOC analyst at my company, right? It's a small company. I'm like maybe one of three security folks in there, and I also do detection stuff, but my title is analyst, right? And we really want to start doing detection engineering. We want to do detection as code. We want to have a detection pipeline. We want to start implementing engineering practices into our detection mechanisms. How do I get started with this stuff? Like with automating detection engineering, how do I do detection as code? How do I build a pipeline? What does that process look like?
Mm. Oh, that's a great question. So you're gonna have native ones like Panther that are coming out, emerging, but there's a lot of Fortune companies that chances are if you're out there as well, you might have some more legacy or traditional schemes and whatnot. I think
Yeah.
there's two ways to think about it. There's the way of actually first thing that I think is in everyone's mind is okay, I want to deploy. I want to deploy as
Mm,
soon as possible. Well, let's hold off on that for a little bit. Why don't we focus on testing? Because there's not going to always be like a good API for you to utilize. So those of you that use certain versions of QRadar, obviously pre-Palo Alto, but the also the older versions of Splunk, or perhaps you're not using an AWS backed Splunk in the cloud, you may not have access to the same kind of APIs. So I think the first step is usually figuring out how to use the Git repo. Start with
mm,
shoving stuff in there first. But before you shove anything in there first, really plan it out. Actually think like an architect, think like a senior engineer. How do you design the prefixes, naming conventions? How does your folder should look like? Because it's just so much more than just dumping it into a folder and walking away. How do you normalize it? Because not everything you're going to be doing is going to fit into an easy payload. So,
yeah.
case in point, if you're ever writing Suricata or Snort rules, and those of you that are very traditional network security people, and yeah, sure, you can convert it into the Palo Altos and stuff, but you can't just throw it into separate files for it easy to be parsed. You have to figure
Hmm.
out that first. So first and foremost, figure out your syntax structure. Do you want to wrap it in something like that? So with
Yeah.
Panther, you have like Python or something like that. But chances are you're going to have domain specific languages or DSL, and like you want to make sure it's wrapped into a normalized item where there's metadata, enrichments, TTPs, whatever you want to do for your overall program for tracking the use case lifecycle. Right, the use case lifecycle is an important concept here. And then once you've done that, put it into the repo. Right, obviously secure the repo. Do all your OPSEC stuff, and then from there, make sure you have version controlling going on. And once you've done that first baby step and learn how to use the GUI, learn how to use the Git commands afterwards, take the next step. How do you actually create a GitHub Actions runner? And for that, that's essentially a YAML file that gives it a orchestration script. And then from there, create your next scripts, which are, can you use the API? And if you can't use the API, can you do an RPA to deploy something or at least test something? Python, it doesn't matter. Really, GitHub supports almost every language you can really think of from a product. Learn
Yeah.
how to test first. Learn how to actually make your own unit test, for instance, and learn how it deploys at least locally first, and then port it to an API and a secrets management usage like GitHub Secrets, and pull that back into your environment variables from there. And I talk about this in the book, obviously, but if you practice these things in baby steps, you'll eventually get to the pipeline you want. You'll still have to
Yeah.
refactor some code and go backwards. You think you're never going to get it right the first time. It's going to be
Yeah.
tuning, unit tests, integration tests, and then once you finally get to a really mature pipeline, eventually full breach adversary simulation tests. So like using Atomic Red Team, using
Yeah.
your cloud range items, and then do that full test. And then if you want to get really crazy with it, which I think we've seen from the recent incident across all vendors, get that extra resiliency. Do what pen testers are doing. Use DATS, fuzz it. See if you can actually make something crash in an actual live production-like environment as an emulator, not simulator. And then once that whole pipeline is done, it might cost you a lot more money in terms of time and compute, but now you have a really robust rule and change control. And then the rest of it's just tracking your own work as a human to the machine.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's like a very, very robust, like, and high level, like, approach to doing this. And the main thing there is like just taking incremental steps, right? Like
Yeah.
you're not going to go from like having nothing to like having a fully operationalized detection pipeline where you're pushing detections to a code repo with like like some going to prod or like some going to stage and like and having like all the tests in there, like syntax tests, pre-commit hooks, all of those things. Like you're not gonna have that like in a short time. It takes time to like constantly like build up, and then you add more things, you operationalize. And I could definitely tell you're gonna have to do some code refactoring, because you're really not gonna get it right the first time. The first time is just basically like getting something up and running, but you eventually like, okay, it works now, okay, let's clean it up a little bit. Refactoring code is kind of fun. It's like you just spend time just like moving things around, like just rearranging stuff. But and I know you go into more details about particular sort of like approach and all the different actual intricacies of it, like scripts you can use and all of that within the book. So I definitely recommend checking out the book. It'll be linked in the description below. It goes over the actual technical details about doing all of these different things. And Dennis and I actually in a conversation about doing a multi-part series about going from start to finish with actually building out a fully operationalized detections pipeline. And hopefully we can have that out in coming weeks, whatever the case may be. But we're definitely going to try to see what we can do in regards to like bringing some practical like approach. Of course, Dennis leading that into operationalizing and fully building out like an automated like detections pipeline. So keep an eye out for that. So the next thing I wanted to go into right now, we're in the AI hype.
Mm.
It seems like we're still in. It seemed like the hype was like I don't know if we're still at the peak of the hype. I think we're kind of a bit of a drop off point. It's not really down here, but it's just like somewhere below the peak. And there's AI everything now. Like every domain that you see now is something dot to AI. Of course, there's ChatGPT. There's Llama. There's Claude. There are all these different models, and of course, like cybersecurity, we have all these different AI use cases. Like you're starting to see people making like AI SOC agents, like to automate
Mm.
like tier 1 or even tier 2 level work. We're seeing people use AI to like, I actually even saw a tool, I forget what it was, I have to find it, like that could actually help you with writing detection rules
Hmm.
using like an agent based method. I think it was GPT that this person was using. Like we're seeing AI being used across the landscape, both in and out of cybersecurity. But I wanted to speak specifically to detection engineering. How does AI play a role in detection engineering and automating it? And I know you had a couple of pages about that within the book, but what is your take on that?
Yeah, definitely. So in the book, I describe it as synthetic AI testing inside the pipeline. It acts as a qualitative reviewer. If you're looking at it from a journal perspective, one of the most important things is obviously that in the pipeline is test. Now you mentioned code AI agents, and at the time of writing, like I didn't feel like it was a good scope for the book. It was just a little. In fact, it's still too new.
Yeah,
And
very
to your
new.
point, like yeah, we're AI and kind of going down in the slope, and it's because let's be honest with ourselves. Like the AI hype came up, Gen AI was still really amazing stuff. At least the potential was there. And what I'm finding is that C-suites they have to justify the money they spent or the strategic direction they're going to. So, okay, things like and this is managerial terms like OKRs, which are objective key results. A Gartner term, something called output delivery metrics and stuff like that, or ODM or
Mm,
something. And so they're trying to figure out what to do with cybersecurity ops AI. The problem is the Gen AI today is good at summarizing something, so that's why you see all these sims. Oh, like we're summarizing the alert for you, but then like it still
yeah.
sucks, and that's all it's good for now. I think when we're experimenting with the code AI stuff or the agent based AI items, we're going to see a lot more iteration. So as we become better detection engineers, we get our first pipelines put in. The first step is to obviously insert it as a validator. So we have Code Rabbit out there that kind of does a code scan for you and review. Actually does a halfway decent job. I'm surprised. And it'll stop it and then force you to fill the code. And that's that's an on-off switch. I think the
Yeah.
next step for AI is the code agents that you refer to, which is generating the actual signatures. I like to do like a hybrid sheet of that. So I'm thinking like you can't just rely on the only model. These models are large language models. They're not specifically
Yeah.
trained for our stuff. And that takes
Yeah.
because of the amount of data points we have to connect as real analysts and engineers, that's a hard amount of dimensions to kind of factor for. So I think the cheater way we could actually do something is a voting system amongst LLMs. So like the Claude
Mm,
3.5, ChatGPT or GPT 4.0 and stuff like that. Have them rate different things and have different
mm,
interpretations, and then have your code kind of come in there as a glue and go, okay, how do we consolidate the diffs? Put it through a third model, Prince, and then and then use a comparison. So that third model could actually go to Uncoder AI from a SOC Prime,
yeah.
get those Sigma rules pulled in, do a comparison, and then do a self-synthesized check. Then shove it into a localized runner. So in GitHub, you can actually download an agent and let it error out as an exit 1 or 0 or something like that. And then that could be part of your left side of your pipeline at this point, which is generating the detections for you. And you always want a human in the loop. We're not there yet where we can
Yeah.
trust it and have it make a git commit and then create a PR instantly, right? And then
Hmm.
you just definite. So that's still a lot of work taken away from you where you can actually augment your AI as DE. I think the third iteration of this, and I don't think we're there yet. I think we're a few years out still from a practical perspective, is using those code agents to further not replace but augment security researchers. They're doing this so far,
Mm,
but like it's only for fuzzing. Like it's not truly like figuring out how to create true proof of concepts. I think that's the next venture in. And if a vendor can figure it out or a startup can figure it out, I mean, they're going to be rich. And I think that's where we can actually inject ourselves into this
yeah.
outside of, obviously the obvious red team tool cases like generate me polymorphic payload or something.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's like one of the things that I picked from that is like these models that we're generally familiar with at the very least are large language models, and they're specifically large language models as they're named. I think as the AI landscape develops or gets better, we probably might be seeing like different kinds of models that are not large language models, but are more so like domain specific models that are actually built, defined, or refined for specific use cases, whether it's security or software engineering, whatever the case may be. And I think now it's sort of like at least from what I see across the industry, it's like experimental. It's very like yeah, it's very experimental. People are just kind of like playing around with it, figuring out what can we do with it, and then of course you have some startups that are out there trying to like immediately like capitalize on it. So I'm actually very very curious and very interested to see like what that eventually turns into. And speaking more on that, overall, you've been a practitioner for quite a while, whether it's like IT or cybersecurity. Overall, you've been in this field for over 2 decades now. That's like older than I am, as a matter of fact.
Oh, so old.
And like you've been doing this for a while, and you've seen different trends. Where we at? Based off where we're at right now, what do you see
Hmm.
as the future of cybersecurity? But also, like you could ask at a tangential point for detection engineering. But I'm very curious as to what you think cybersecurity is going into the future.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, let me take you back a little bit in time. Being
Okay.
24 years and all. Um, Like Generation One was all about policy and procedures, right?
Mm,
They complete cowboy rodeo show, and like they were just trying to get the frameworks going. Generation Two was all about NetSec. That's where kind of I entered in PCAPs because PCAPs were at the time were cheaper than trying to get logs. So compressions and
mm,
and disk costs, compute costs were too hot. Now we flipped the
yeah.
script. Application security became next, where we were all about the web apps. Things were just moving to the cloud, so you had to figure out WAFs and stuff like that, and API gateways and that good stuff. 3.5 is kind of like the resurgence of popularity of OT and ICS as we get more, type of IoTs out there. Now we're in generation 4, which is really the AI generation. Like AI has become less useless because you're not struggling creating a two-dimensional model with pandas and like figuring
Mm.
out the linear regression with that TensorFlow and stuff like that, right? You're not having that large scale issues anymore for that. And so I think people, what they're doing is wrapping it, like I said, experimenting with everything, trying to figure out where it's reliable enough where you have less of a hands-on perspective. That's going to be a little while, but because we're in that perspective, now we still have a last bit of chance. And I say last bit of chance to still kind of make good money in security infrastructure and configuration. Now,
Mm,
as you know, in detection engineering, as the industry has moved forward, you start having to be more and more technical over the years.
yeah, yeah,
IT support today cannot afford not to know some sort of script, right?
yeah.
And so, like, the same thing happens with us. So you can't just be in there playing GRC person anymore if you want top dollar. Today, that is just, AI something, and C levels want to see you. I want to say truly reduce the value of the stock, but they want to see the augment it where they have to hire less heads. Remember,
Mm,
businesses are there for one thing, money, and they're going to reduce the amount of costs as possible unless you're helping them make money
yeah.
as a cost center. So I think we're there in in the future. We're going to have to become augmented researchers and developers, like all of us. I think how long that's far off, about 5, 7 years, I think, if we continue this current growth pattern. I've been off for about 1 or 2 years, but if you look at it today, if you want to be in SecOps today, you want to make top dollar, you got to have Grim, GXPin, I won't say the certs, but at least those level of skill, right? To
Mm,
do what you were doing yesterday, which was, worth even more. Same thing with AI. I think you have to utilize it for automating different things. And if you don't know how to create your own agents, per se, just to give it an instruction, let it go out and do
yeah.
something for you in a consistent manner, you're going to be left behind in about 5, 7 years.
Yeah, yeah. I think like, that point, the last point you made about that agent is like the key thing here, right? Because ultimately, like we're gonna have these like customized like small units of models or like agents, right? That are going to be able to do very specific things because they're trained on specific kind of data and are also like tuned and refined on specific kinds of instructions and data. And I think like that's probably going to be like that, natural evolution from like, just regular prompt engineering and then actually having like specific models or specific agents that do specific things. But I think definitely like I agree with you with regards to most of us going to have like that we're going to have to be some sort of developers in a sense, right? I think like we're moving in a direction where you're gonna have to know how to code, right? Like it's just going to be important because at this point, like you said, you're not taking away the human. The human still has to be in the loop, but the human has to be the one validating the work of the
Mhm.
artificial intelligence model. And we need humans that actually know what the right thing is, right? If you tell
Yeah.
the model or the AI thing to like write you some code and it writes something that is not correct or it doesn't fit well into your
Yep.
application or into your tooling, you should be able to know, okay, like this is wrong. I can correct this. I can fix this. Or I could tell it to, oh, fix this thing or make this thing better. That's like you're basically telling it what to do. But if you don't know what is the right way to do things or what should be done, then you can't tell it what to do. And that would come from having knowledge of like coding and, automation and all of that stuff. So I definitely think
Yeah.
that's a very good, like, accurate, like,
Yeah.
description of like what the future could possibly look like. And I'm very,
Yeah.
very like I'm excited for it. I think it'll be great. Like, I think we're gonna have a sort of cybersecurity like model or team model or like structure where like people are just like making things a lot more efficient and are using
Yeah.
these AI tools to make things a lot more efficient. So I think it's an exciting future for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I forgot to bring this up, but like one good thing that come out of it, other than detection engineering and red team tooling. Let's say you have like some sort of like super crazy Delphi COBOL binary or something like that. You could use AI, right, to decompile it, create usable code, help you port things. Because as
Yeah,
people age out of the industry and just or they quit doing certain things, what do you do? So like all this reverse engineering is more than this just for malware or hacking. Like you can still use AI for
yeah,
some security good. And I think I
yeah,
see a fusion of departments, right? We become a technology department, like similar to what you've mentioned, like the model becomes more of a cohesive optimization of supervising robots, essentially. And you kind of see that already with Amazon workers in the physical realm. I think we can
yeah.
do this in the software realm too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, ultimately, it's like all computers, right? The when the computers first came, I mean, I wasn't around then, but I think the fear was like computers are going to take all the jobs away. But what ended up happening? Humans were the ones using the computers to do things, right? So I think that's ultimately what's going to be. And in the same breath of that, with regards to you, your
Yeah.
career, and looking forward, what's going to be next for you? If we're talking this time 5, 7 years from now, or maybe even a year from now, what are we going to be looking at?
I think for me, I started doing some. I'm going to go back and switch the flag again, and kind of go a little bit more red because I do think R&D and becoming a researcher, at least a junior one, is where I need to keep my current salary that I'm looking for. Right. I'm not going to
Hmm.
say everyone's going to lose a job. I do think that your valuation goes down over time unless you're at the latest and greatest edge of skills, right? We've seen this in the 90s when you used to have Comp USA in the stores you took your PCs to that you got fixed, right? They were worth something.
Yeah.
You're not seeing that so much anymore. So it's the same with us. I think what for me is I'm going to start creating additional red team tools and things that bypass not only detection engineering efforts, but also try to bypass AI efforts as well.
Mm.
Google came out, like we've been all talking about this in the industry, but like Dr. Anton Chervakin came out with a talk at Google Next not too long ago, where they finally created an opinionated, from a Google perspective, standard on AI security as a framework around not
Mm.
just the model itself that we all know about, not just prompt engineering injection, but the entire threat vectors around how we utilize AI today, model and systems surrounding that. So I want to do some tooling and research around a lot more of that. And then we just got approved for a book outline. And so we'll be drafting that next book, and hopefully you'll be a part of it soon. And we'll publish some of that, and hopefully that can help the audience in the perhaps another year or two.
Yeah, yeah, that all sounds exciting. Dennis, it's
Yeah,
been a pleasure having this conversation with you, and I wish you all the best in your future endeavors. And also, I'm looking forward to us, discussing further about the series we're talking about regarding actually building out a fully operationalized automated detection engineering pipeline. And keep an eye out for that. Thanks for being here today.
awesome. Thank you for having me.
Of course, see you in the next one.
See ya.
Hey, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Cyber Stories podcast. We really appreciate your support. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to like and subscribe for future episodes, and comment down below the one thing you learned from this podcast. Also, don't forget to check out the video description for various resources to kickstart or advance your cybersecurity career. You can also choose to binge on our previous episodes by clicking on this playlist on your screen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.